And now we're on. Welcome back, everybody, to the Pinedo Brothers podcast, episode 2 of season 2. I'm glad that you're here with us. So, if you don't know us, we're the Pinedo Brothers. We are filmmakers, artists, and Catholics. And our mission is to combine those two and revitalize the world of Catholic art and filmmaking. So, welcome. We're going to be talking about all the incredible and crazy things that are happening in today's world and in the art world as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my co-host, JP.
Hey!
JP is here with me, and we're going to be talking about Stan Lee versus the woke. Yep. Stan Lee, I'm sure you know him, because if you don't, then you have, something else going on. But Stan Lee is the creator of Marvel as we know it. Big hero, giant heroes like Spider-Man, the X-Men, things like that. And he kind of, give me your thoughts on Stan Lee real quick before we go any further.
The first thing I think about Stan Lee is how I love how he was wanting to quit. He thought of himself as a failure up until, I think it was his late 30s. Failure as a storyteller. He was just going to stop it, and no longer try and write comic books. He's a comic book writer for the tiny little failing Marvel Comics back in the early 60s. And his wife convinces him, okay, just stick it out one more, but this time just write a story that you want to write. Don't write for someone else. Don't write for your publisher. Don't write for your boss. Write something that you want to write. And then he just, that's what helps him write a little thing called Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And after that, it was Fantastic Four and Avengers and X-Men. Pretty much every single thing that you've heard of from Marvel Comics is Stan Lee. But yeah, I like the guy a lot. One of my heroes.
But we're talking about Stan Lee, particularly in the context of kind of a big thing that's happening. And as you know, Marvel is owned by Disney. And Disney is doing some crazy things these days. Disney Plus taking some pretty, wild, pretty woke stances. So we're going to be comparing and contrasting Stan Lee and his work, and then also the works of such authors as J.R.R. Tolkien with The Lord of the Rings. And we'll even talk a little bit about the Founding Fathers and how companies like Disney are taking these ideas and kind of just going against everything that they're, founded on. So
fuel up, guys. Get some whiskey.
Get ready to get mad.
Let's go for it.
So we're going to be discussing, first off, the new Disney Marvel trailer, which, if you haven't seen yet, it strikes some grand notes, and it really seems to be going for an interesting take, which, I was a little bit surprised that Disney was going for, since their messaging lately has been very, honestly kind of divisive. But the message of this trailer is kind of, it seems it wants to unify. It's talking about, and it has Stan Lee, voicing over. So do we want to go ahead and just show it, and then we can discuss it?
Let's go for it.
All right.
I love being with people. It's the most incredible thing in the world.
What are you doing? Oh, this is nice.
That world may change and evolve. But the one thing that will never change, we're all part of one big family. That man next to you, he's your brother. That woman over there, she's your sister.
Higher, further, faster, baby.
That's right.
We're all part of one universe.
Wakanda forever!
moves ever upward and onward to greater glory.
On your left. Avengers!
I've lived a lot of lives. But I'm done running from my past. We have unfinished business.
Who's we?
When you love something, you fight for it. We're the ones who changed everything.
Okay, so yeah, that is the new trailer. It looks pretty cool, and of course, absolutely love that we've got the Stan Lee voiceover there.
Stan the Man Lee.
Yeah, I think really something about Stan Lee, his like aura, his essence, just really I think brings people together. And it might just be the legend and the really personality that he's built up around himself.
Carefully curated legend. He never
Yes.
told the same story twice. So the story I told was one of many iterations that may or may not be true. But it's not my fault if it's not true.
Yeah, but so I think Marvel did a really good. I mean, they made a good choice having Stan Lee narrate it because they know that it's something that brings people together, and it is a nice message. That idea of like just coming out of the virus and everything like that. Everyone is really just hurting and really craving community and having. And being together with a group of people, even if it's at a movie like that. You saw that they showed that clip of people watching, which was it, an Avengers movie, and everyone just goes wild. I think it was when Iron Man. Yep. So it's a pretty I feel like I like the first half of it, and then once it starts getting into later, like showing what they're actually going to be, the next movies that are coming out, it's a little bit less exciting. But really the problem I have with it is more that it's kind of a different message than what Disney as a company has been putting out. And lately, I've kind of given up on Disney Plus because of all the shows and things that they've been doing. It seems like they're not targeting me as an audience, they're targeting me as a target.
Yeah. I'm curious, did you watch WandaVision or Captain America and the Falcon? I think is what it's called.
So I was actually super excited for Winter Soldier and the Falcon, because Winter Soldier, he's a really cool character. I like him a lot from the movies. And so I was really excited about that show. And I did watch, because the, what is the other one called? WandaVision came out first. So I watched about half of that. and I was really enjoying it. I thought it was pretty well made. And then about halfway through the season is when they came out and fired Gina Carano essentially fired her for being conservative. And so I was not about that. And I'm not even a fan of Gina Carano, really. Like, I don't really know anything about her.
I was neither a fan nor was terribly interested. My wife actually was a fan of hers, but I didn't even like Bounty Hunter. Or, it's not Bounty Hunter. What's it, the Jango Fett one?
Mandalorian?
The Boba Fett. No, it's not Boba Fett.
Mandalorian.
The
show.
Mandalorian,
Yeah.
yes. I didn't even like it very much.
It was kind of
But
bland.
it's still not cool. It's still not cool what you do. Like, someone who is not out trying to hurt anyone, simply just saying their thoughts, which they can back up with logic, and you get fired for it.
Yeah.
And it's not even something offensive. Anyway, we're not talking about that. We can have another rant about that another time. But in case, sorry.
Yeah. So, but basically, I was watching WandaVision, and then that happened, and I just turned it off. Like, I stopped after that. I was into the show, was interested in what was going to happen, but I haven't seen a single episode since then because I was just like, I'm not going to log on to Disney Plus again. Okay. And so that's why I'm thinking, like, what they're saying in this trailer is something different from what I've come to expect from them, and just based on the content they've been producing for the last couple of years. And so I'm very, very cynical that their new slate of movies is going to be any different from what they've been doing the last couple of years. But maybe they'll surprise me. But I think what we're going to bring up here as an example is the Captain Marvel movie, which I don't know, are you familiar with the Captain Marvel movie?
Yes. Just for the people at home, what if we run through the whole slate that's upcoming, and we kind of
yes,
just so that people are able to know what we're talking about here.
Yes.
This is actually really great because Peter came up with the idea of this podcast, and when I read about the idea, I said, okay, well, let me find out what the slate of movies are that are coming up, because this is sad for me to say. I loved the Marvel movies, but I was kind of done after Avengers Endgame, just because nothing really they had played out all the stories at this point, and I'm not really that interested anymore. And I didn't want to be a rat that's continually sucking on some kind of opiate of the masses, which is not religion, by the way. And so when Peter came up with this idea for this podcast, I started looking at what they've got. And so what you're seeing right here is a lot of different ones. There's Black Widow. The question I have about Black Widow is why? She's dead. There's no stakes anymore, but still, that's maybe a little bit of propaganda piece. You got to have that strong, empowered female character.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange. And now I had a connection with that director, Scott Derrickson, originally. He was the original director of Doctor Strange. But a friend of mine was a friend of his, and we would talk about how the work that they had done, and great friends and admirer of what he's done. And I was pretty disappointed when Scott Derrickson was no longer a part of it. But now it's Sam Raimi. So Raimi's a mixed bag. Don't know what to think of that. After that, we've got Thor, which is again directed by Taika. I have a feeling Taika's. I'm not bullish on that one. Thor: Love and Thunder.
They've kind of taken Thor in a way different direction than what they started off with him.
Well, that's the thing. Taika was directing it, and I've listened to his. Taika Waititi was the director of the last Thor, which was
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, yes, and he was writing it and directing it with the idea that he wasn't going to write and direct another one. You even hear him do the interviews, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not interested in doing another one." And here they got him back to do another Thor, when again the character is so played out. Of course, they got to reboot him with another one, and with a female Thor now. I'm not sure where they're going to go with it. I was in agreement with Taika when he was saying that Thor is done. And now they're going to try and reboot in a different character. Again, I feel like I'm a rat sucking at the opiate of the masses at this point, and I'm not very bullish on that one. So whatever. In any case, going back to it, we've got Eternals. This one was interesting. I didn't realize that the director was someone by the name of Chloe Zhao. I'm glad you had me research this, Peter, because she's someone who was born in China and now is very critical of the Chinese regime, which is and her last movies had been actually censored by the Chinese regime. They'd been critically acclaimed.
Good for her.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, someone who's got some guts here. Then we got Black Panther. No more, which doesn't have Black Panther, so I'm not sure what they're going to do. Tragically, the actor who plays Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, is dead. Spider-Man. This one is interesting. They're bringing back Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, which is super.
I have hopes for that one.
Yeah. So do I. Shang-Chi. All I read about that one is mostly Asian cast, and I stopped reading. I don't understand why. Why is it important that? Why is race the deciding factor of casting now? Like that is, I don't understand. It used to be acting, and then it was how much money can you make. I guess maybe it was always how much money you can make, and now everything has to be some kind of weird critical race theory sort of thing. And I have no stomach for that. I'm not interested in that movie at all, just because that's their lead off thing is it's a mostly Asian cast. Okay, I'm no longer interested. Nothing. I don't have nothing against Asian actors. It's just. Why? Like, you have to get something different for me to want to watch your movie. If that's what you lead off with, then we got issues. I have no problem watching movies made in Asian countries that already have de facto mostly Asian casts, but that's not what they lead off with to try to get me to watch the movie. So in any case, Guardians of the Galaxy, James Gunn is back. After being fired. He was canceled.
Canceled and uncanceled.
Canceled, and they brought him back very quietly. Hopefully no one noticed, is I think what they were thinking of. Okay. And then two more. The one that I am actually kind of interested in the most of all of these is Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's got a writer of Rick and Morty, which Rick and Morty is a TV show that is very raunchy, very oftentimes bad. Like, I don't think it's a very good show a lot of times. It's such a mixed bag. But sometimes it's amazing. My wife's a big fan, and she's kind of shown me some of the best episodes, and I see the reason why people are always talking about that show. So the actor that plays one of the writers of Rick and Morty is a writer in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and that really interests me. I'm like, okay, let's see where he goes with that. That's very interesting. And also, the villain's one of the best all-time Marvel villains, one of Stan Lee's greatest, Kang the Conqueror. But in any case, the last one is the one that I think we're going to talk about a lot in this. I apologize, we went through this whole list, Peter. Captain Marvel. And that one is actually only interesting because of how hard they've tried to make it boring. But in any case, that's the lineup. That's what we're talking about here. And I'm so curious to hear what you're talking about when you say bring up Captain Marvel.
Yeah, so Captain Marvel, I have a lot of problems, and where to get started, really. The movie Captain Marvel, the first one, was everything that you don't want to do as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, because it you know that classic. I don't know if you've ever. I'm sure you, JP, are familiar with that rule that you in storytelling you show, don't tell. You know, and the entire movie of Captain Marvel is telling, not showing.
Yeah, that's 101 bad filmmaking.
Yeah, and so that is just that's already a mountain that you can't really get over if you're just they're constantly saying, oh, she has a bad temper. She never really loses her temper. She said, saying like she has these insecurities. She never seems insecure. She always seems pretty confident and so you have all these different things they keep on talking about, but they never show you, and so you're always kind of confused on like, wait, I don't really know what's going on. But one of the biggest things, and it kind of ties into what you were saying about how it starts off with, whichever movie, Shang-Chi, like mostly Asian cast. I'm like, all right, I will watch a movie with a mostly Asian cast, but if you're telling me that's like
why I should watch it,
then I'm not as, like that's not really a reason. I mean, when you're just concentrating on race, it's Like, why am I supposed to be that? Why is that the thing that I need to be concentrating on? We live in a society that is made up of all different kinds of races, and so I'm like, to me, it's nothing new. Like, okay, cool. But the thing with Captain Marvel, I think, is that the entire movie revolves around her just being a woman. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's have some good, strong stories surrounding women. But I don't think they really fleshed out her character any more than the idea that she was a woman. All right, she's a woman. And so the writers are like, all right, so what are we going to say? Well, she's a woman. Okay.
Did we mention she's a woman?
And it's just...
Well, there's this really bad guy coming up, but did we mention she's a woman?
Yeah. And so at the end of the movie, you don't feel any kind of sense of satisfaction or any kind of sense of attachment to the character because you were never told anything at all about her, which is a great disservice to women characters, I think. Actually, a movie that I'm a big fan of is The Hunger Games, and that revolves around a woman main character, and she's a strong female lead, but she has depth of character and she has actual personality. She has shortcomings and she has strong suits, and she is I would say a pretty well-rounded character. So that I would point to as a good example of a good, strong female lead. Where Captain Marvel over here is, she's a woman.
Yeah, something that when you wrote, folks, when we think about ideas to write about our podcast, we generally are so ill-prepared. I apologize in advance. Thank you for listening to us. But when we when we think about ideas for this podcast, we generally send each other an email. And when you sent this, you wrote this line that I was so interested in, and I wanted to hear what you had to say about it. You said, Captain Marvel, Disney abandoned Stan Lee. Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons that people love Marvel is because when Stan Lee took over and started writing these characters, he wasn't just telling like superhero stories. He was telling stories about people, and he made these superheroes into people. They were three-dimensional characters that had different types of personalities. They had personal lives that in the comics you really delved into. And I think people really, really latched onto that, and they loved that about the characters, that they were relatable. You know, Peter Parker's super relatable. And so what I mean by that is that now Marvel, owned by Disney, seems to be abandoning that idea of really fleshing out their characters and having them presented as real people. I think characters like, of course, Peter Parker and stuff like that are great characters, but you have this character of Captain Marvel who is not a character. She's just I don't know what she is. She's an idea of a woman that somebody has in their mind. So what I mean by that, abandoning Stan Lee, is they're abandoning that idea of good storytelling about good characters and people that you can relate to and understand and really get behind.
Mm-hmm. The thing that people don't realize about Stan Lee is how well read he was. Mm-hmm. The guy knew his stuff. He knew about Western culture. He probably read more Shakespeare than anybody but an English lit professor had read. He knew lines by heart of this guy. And you read what he wrote, you read the storylines that he wrote, and he borrowed from Western culture. He borrowed from Western literature because he knew poetry. He knew all the great plays. He knew the mythic stories of the past. And when you're steeped in that knowledge and you're a storyteller, you can't help but borrow little pieces and bring them in. And these are the great stories of our time. These are the great stories of any time. I think we're going to be talking about Lord of the Rings in a little bit, and that's a perfect example. But what I wanted to say is he knew people like, I already said Shakespeare, but like Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. he knew what the hero's journey was like, and he knew what the trials that a hero had to go through in order to actually be a hero. That's what you see when you see someone like Spider-Man. That's what you see when you see Cyclops, who's on the early X-Men that he was writing. The Cyclops character is a perfect example of a heroic sacrificing character. Not a perfect person, very, very flawed. But he knew, because he had read, because he had learned from the great storytellers of the past, he knew what a great story was, and he knew how a great story is built on truths that are universal to all. And that's what you see when you cheapen someone. And I think this is what you're getting at right here is Captain Marvel, which it's such a shame because Captain Marvel is actually one of my favorite comic book lines, and they're not using any of the good stuff that was there. When you see that, you're looking at a caricature. You're looking at a two-dimensional propaganda piece of what a kick-ass woman should be. And that's boring. There's no journey there. I full all cards on the table. I didn't watch Captain Marvel, but I was so disappointed by how boring she was in Avengers Endgame. There was nothing there. There was no character. She was there. She punched a few people. She was some mythic godlike creature without any myth or any god, which makes you just some all-powerful force that needs to be got out of the way because there's nothing you can do with story if it's an all-powerful force. So you just have to machinate some way to get her out of the way. So it's very disappointing, but in any case, what's an example of someone that does this right, Peter?
Oh, of course there are many examples, but one of my personal favorites is from my favorite author, J.R.R. Tolkien, who of course is the author of The Lord of the Rings. So let's just go ahead and show the scene real quick. One of the great scenes from the Lord of the Rings movies based on J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. So let's go ahead and roll it.
I can't do this, Sam. I know. It's all wrong. By rights, we shouldn't even be here. But we are. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
Yeah. So that is a great scene. Absolutely. There's just so much depth to it. There's so many different things that we could really delve into and talk about why that scene is so good and why it really connects with people. But do you want to go ahead and read a little bit something from?
I would love to.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. Okay, just a little background about this book. My wife calls me a huge nerd. I keep on bringing up my wife. I guess I'm in love with her. Any case, I read this. I think I was maybe 12 or 13 when I read this book, The Two Towers. And of course, this is the book that the clip from the movie you just watched was based upon. And this is almost a 400-page book. I think I read it in a day. I didn't want to eat or sleep. I was so into this book. Yes, I am a humongous nerd. But the end is just so amazing. So this is what this that scene is based upon, this conversation between Sam and Frodo at a very low point. It's a different low point than the story that you just watched, or they moved up and moved around the timeline, but it's still a low point. Yes, that's so, said Sam. And we shouldn't be here at all. Have we known more about it before we started? But I suppose it's often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo. Adventures, as I used to call them. I used to think they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for because they wanted them, because they were exciting and a life was a bit dull and a kind of sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folks seem to have been just landed in them, usually. Their paths were laid out that way, as you put it. But I expect they had lots of chances, like us, of turning back, only they didn't. And if they had, we shouldn't know, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those as just went on. Not all to a good end, mind you. At least not to what folk inside a story, and not outside it, call it a good end. You know, coming home and finding things all right, though not quite the same, like old Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't the best tales to hear, though they may be the best tales to get landed on. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. There's a lot more to read, but we're running short of time.
So, I think what I'm really feeling from this is, I guess to try to tie things together, is that storytelling and the great stories are not just about entertainment, and they're also not about making a point. They're about connecting with people and speaking to them as human beings. We love stories, and that's not a coincidence. It's not random that everyone really loves stories. It's something about the human condition, I think, that ties people together when they read or watch or listen to a great story. Stories are important, and we cannot let companies or different entities try to cancel stories or to whitewash them or turn them into something else, because they're not just for entertainment. They are important, and people like J.R.R. Tolkien, I think, knew this. He is communicating it through Sam, who is a great character here, and he, the author J.R.R. Tolkien, he went through a lot, so he understood this. I mean, he participated in World War I, which was an absolutely horrific war. And so he knew very well the darkness that is in this world, and yet he has hope. He has things worth fighting for. Something Sam says, there's still good in this world, and it's worth fighting for, or holding on to, something like that. And I think that's true. So oftentimes I think people today can be, we as Christians can be very, just kind of be throwing up our hands and be like, all right, well, we've lost control of society. Things are spiraling, crazy. Everything.
Run up into the mountains.
Yes, but we have reasons for hope. There is still good in this society, and it's worth holding on to and worth fighting for. So I think that's really, really the main takeaway from this episode today.
And even the darkness must pass.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good line. That wasn't in the book. Well, it wasn't in that section of the book. That thought is other places, but Jackson did a good job. I still love the books more, but he did. Hats off to him. I think he did a wonderful job. Yeah. When I listen to this, I'm left wondering, what is our story? Like that is what we're called to bring forth. What is our story? And it has to be more powerful than the other stories, or else no one will listen to it. No one will care about it. No, it has to be something that's more appealing than the other stories. And that question, that what is our story, leads me to a wonderful book that I read recently by a good friend of mine, Kaiser Johnson. The book, How to Be Miserable and Alone, or Discover a Life That Truly Matters. Kaiser is a very fascinating friend of mine, a brilliant mind who also happens to be an actor, and an amazing actor at that, who has been in all sorts of TV shows that you might have heard of, like Stranger Things, or that movie, or there's the Transformers anime on Netflix right now that he's in, and he was in that pro-life movie Unplanned, had a pretty big role in that one. So he's had a very interesting life, and he's not old. He's in his 30s. And when he's writing in this book, he's talking about all of the things that he's done wrong, how to be miserable and alone, and then speaking with the wisdom of the ages, the wisdom of the church. And there's my favorite chapter in this book is, do you mind if I read a bit of that?
Okay, I mean, yeah.
My favorite chapter is when he's talking about exactly what our story should be. And he doesn't say it in that way, but when I read it, I realize this is what our story is supposed to be. My daughter was created out of love of her mother and myself. This baby is our love incarnate. How can I not love my love? If I want to love perfectly, how must I cherish this love incarnate, this tiny immortal soul in my care? How much must God, who is perfect love, love me and cherish me and care for me? God made us sharers in this act of creation. I had one other vision, that the one I recounted in the chapter on marriage, and again, I feel as weird saying this as I generally feel about other people telling me that they've had visions. It was around that same time, before I even met my wife, I saw myself and a wife in old age gathered together with our children, their children, and several babies who might have been their children. We were inside, and yet above us stretched the stars and the whole universe, beautiful and terrifying and shocking in its immensity. And the universe was torn open slightly, in a gentle way, not a violent one, and my family stood in that cleft. And I was staggered by this realization of what I was seeing, that while God created all these lives, these incarnate souls standing with my wife and me, so had we. The only reason these people had come into existence was because God had shared his power of creation with us. This God, who made himself father to me, created every single thing that is beautiful: the stars, the sky, the planets, sequoia trees, Zion Canyon, the endless waves of the oceans, toucans, peacocks, dolphins, whales, lions, leopards, coral reefs stretching for miles, rhinoceroses running on the Serengeti, and then turned to me and said, "Here, now you try." That's who my daughter is, a beautiful creation. Through the grace of God is a union of time and eternity. And that's who I am, and who my parents are and their parents. I remember my dad teaching me to ride a bike, which in my case was a long and laborious process that he patiently stuck through, and how much he celebrated when I finally stood upright on my own and rode circles around the elementary school parking lot on a Saturday. I think of my wife and me giving our daughter crayons, drawing a few things for her, showing her how they worked, and then handing them to her. "Here, now you try." She scribbled, and we thought it was the best thing anyone had ever done. If I can dote like that, how much does God, a perfectly loving Father, rejoice and celebrate when we live out the beauty and truth and love that we've learned from him? So, it's not about marriage. It's about the beauty of the created universe that we're a part of. There's good in this world. That the sacrifice that is bringing a child in is worth the sacrifice. The sacrifice of striving to create this quest and take the ring to Mordor and destroy it is worth the sacrifice. The responsibility that it entails to be a parent is worth it. The responsibility that entails to be an artist or to be whatever you are is worth it. We're fighting for something that is of great import, and it's worth fighting for. We have stories, and our story needs to be better. Every person's life is a story, and our story can be better. As Christians, as Catholics, as artists, our story can be better than the anti-story that's out to get you. I don't think we have time. I wanted to read a bit of the Similarian because this exactly speaks to this idea of what you're talking about. But we're out of time, and I'm sorry. It's a quest. It's a wonderful enterprise, and we're all a part of it.
Yes, and unfortunately, we are running out of time here.
I wanted to say I got you a book.
Oh, you got me a book?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
That's different.
And thank you, Kaiser.
It's different from mine. I wanted to get you one, Peter.
Ah, yes. Thank you very much. I look forward to reading this. Yeah. So I'm glad that was beautiful. What you read there from Kaiser. It really reminds you that even aside from having kids and things like that, you're a part of God's creation, and you're given a part of being being a creator through your daily life. Every morning you wake up and you have this opportunity to create something out of your day. And so I guess to wrap up here, I promised we were going to talk a little bit about the founding fathers, so we'll just mention them real quick. Someone like George Washington, the first president. Obviously, they created something. They created the United States of America. And today, people are saying, that it's not worth it, that it's evil, it's founded on evil ideas. And I disagree with that. I oftentimes say that the United States is the greatest country in the world, and I don't say that out of really any sense of pride, but more sense of scientific fact. We're based on ideas that are greater than any other country's founding has ever been. So what I'm getting at is that we need to hold on to our history, hold on to our ideas, our ideals as well, and to not let other people tell us that this is wrong. We know that things like the Catholic Church, the faith, our faith, it holds us true to who we're supposed to be. So don't let go of it. Don't let it be canceled. Let it drive us forward, and let's tell more stories. So go ahead.
Oh, it sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Alrighty, so thank you for joining us. I know that we went over time today, but I'm glad you were able to sit in here on this conversation with me and JP, and we'll see you next time.
Peace!